Joining us on the phone now to talk about the treatment of the many victims is our own Dr. David Agus, who joins us from California. Dr. Agus, we just heard Carter say and the sheriff tell us earlier that more than 400 people were taken to the hospital. How do hospitals deal with a situation like this when you have that volume all at the same time?
Well, there needs to be a triage program where you assess and you say which individuals are too sick, that is, can't breathe on their own and probably aren't going to make it, and who's very ill, but immediate intervention will benefit from them. And it's a horrible decision to have to make, but you need to start to say, where can I use the man and women power I have to save people?
Dr. Agus, explain how hospitals rehearse for situations, terrible situations like this, how they prepare.
Well, they go through the drills where they do the triage and rapid treatment. And so the triage is assessing, is there an injury in the brain so that they will not be able to save this patient, even though they are doing some breathing now? Or is this patient, of a situation where I could just plug the wound and, keep them stable until there's time to assess them? Or does this need to be immediately assessed and then the patient will be okay? That triage is critical and knowing, and it's a very difficult thing, obviously, because some people you're going to have to say, these are people who we are not going to be able to save, even though if the emergency room was empty, they would be able to save them.
I know, but David, you're making a life and death decision in these cases with seconds to spare.
No question about it.
Yeah.
And you have to start to grade people so that you can save the most people, the most casualties, and have the most people who make it through the event. It is a horrible position to be in, obviously, as a physician or a patient.
And we know that every second is critical. We've heard from multiple eyewitnesses that it sounded as if it were 8, 10, even 20 minutes before it seemed like the gunfire finally ended. How big of a setback was that to transporting victims to hospitals if people were still waiting for the shooting to come to an end?
Minutes are everything in these situations, and obviously the more you bleed, the more your blood pressure is going to be down, the more you need an immediate intervention like a transfusion. And so classically when they get to the hospital, they can be tagged where there's red, yellow, green, and obviously black or gray. And so each of those tags tells them who they should pay attention to at that moment they arrive at the hospital.
David, very important point. The Las Vegas police tweeted out the location where folks can go if they want to donate blood this morning. Is there something you could say or would say to folks living in that immediate area?
Well, this is critical. I mean, we saw in the 60 Minutes story on Congressman Scalise last night that blood donations are what saved his life. And so many of these patients, blood donation is the only thing that will get them to the next phase, which is hopefully to a savable phase. So as much as you can, go in and donate blood today. Every citizen can donate blood today and hopefully reduce the number of casualties by doing so.
Yeah, we've heard 2 reports, David, of people who were wounded but had to hide out and couldn't seek treatment immediately. You touched on it a minute ago where you said, listen, it's so important to get help right away. What about those people, the shape that they must be in now?
Yeah, so I mean, if there are any people out there, the key is apply pressure. The more we can limit the bleeding, the better the outcome is going to be. And so those people, when they come in, obviously there'll be significant blood loss, and right away they will be getting blood that is O negative, and so because they don't have enough time to type those patients. So especially if you are in that category of O negative blood, get in there right away, and everybody get in and try to donate blood. It's critical.
And of course, right now the focus is on keeping these victims alive and recovered and treating them. But we already hear the mental wounds that these victims, these 22,000 spectators at this event, they're witness to this mass carnage. Talk about the months, weeks, and years ahead for them trying to recover from what they witnessed.
I can only imagine, the post-traumatic stress associated with what was going on here. This is being at war, and these people at this concert were at war. And so there are all going to be significant manifestations. And that's something that obviously after the event, the medical community will start to set up ways to deal with these individuals and figure out how to help them as much as possible. But right now, the focus is only one thing, which is saving lives.
Yeah, and we know that hospitals prepare and train for something like this. But when it happens, David, how prepared are you really for 400 people coming into your place all at one time, spread over different hospitals, of course?
You aren't even close. I mean, we go through drills all the time for earthquake, for mass shooting, et cetera, and you don't imagine it's going to happen. So you do the best you can, but there's trauma in every person in that ER, the post-traumatic stress is also the doctors and the nurses and everybody dealing with it. They're not used to dealing with this. They weren't trained to being at war either.
David, how do they coordinate or figure out which patient is going to which hospital?
Well, it's based on time. And so, the closest hospital are the ones who are going to say, well, listen, I can save this patient very quickly if I get them there. They need a transfusion right away. We can stop that bleeding, et cetera. This person is less critically ill and can be, transported 20 miles or whatever the next hospital is away. And so somebody is at the ground there doing that central triage, and they are key to saving life, this person.
And as we heard from Carter and many eyewitnesses, it wasn't just ambulances. There weren't enough ambulances to transport all of those wounded and who were struck. Private cars, I'm sure taxi cabs and anything available to take patients to hospitals was being utilized. How rare is that in an incident like this? And does it cause any confusion upon entering the hospital?
Oh, it absolutely must. But heroes are stepping up. Heroes are stepping up and getting people there because minutes counts in this situation. When you're bleeding or actively with a gunshot, you're losing blood, and if you get past a certain point, it's almost impossible to turn around. So the quicker you can get the patients in to try to stop that bleeding and get them transfusions, the more lives you're going to save. So kudos to those who are stepping up and doing this. But yes, when you arrive at we're used to somebody getting off that ambulance and explaining what's going on and giving all the vitals and saying what's happening. Here, private citizens bringing people in, there's nobody assessing that, obviously, in the car.
All right, Dr. David Agus joining us on the phone this morning. Doctor, thank you so much for your time.